What's going on, everybody? I hope your week has been blessed. We're almost there, the 40th celebration of the Pastoral Evangelism and Leadership Council. Our theme this year is E40, Evangelism Remembered, Reimagined, and Reignited. And if you haven't registered, go do it now. You don't want to miss it. We've been having some powerful messages these past several weeks, and we've got another good one for you today. I have no doubt that you will be richly blessed and inspired. Until December, may God bless you and keep you, and we'll see you soon.
Let us pray. For the next few moments, O Lord, it is our prayer that you will take absolute control. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. I direct your attention to the Gospel according to St. Luke, the 24th chapter. Let's consider verses 28 through 32. The Bible states clearly and succinctly, "And they drew nigh unto the village, whither they went, and he made as though he would have gone further. But they constrained him, saying, Abide with us. For it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to tarry with them. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread, and blessed it, and brake it, and gave to them, and their eyes were opened. And they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight. And they said one to another, Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the Scriptures?" The divine missive for contemplation this morning zeroes in on the kind of faith we will especially need in these last days. No superficial connection with Jesus will do. No ordinary faith in God's sovereignty will do. It must be a faith that can endure. A trust in a God that does not seem to behave and move like the God we read about in Scripture. This faith will be in a God so preoccupied with getting things ready for us to go home that he will not move in usual ways. He will maneuver in strange and sometimes unpredictable ways. There is a statement in great controversy that says we will go for a period where we will have no intercessor in heaven. We will simply have to hold to God's unchanging hand because we know how God has led us in the past. I want to talk about that kind of relationship, that kind of faith. In the 24th chapter of the book of Luke, some dissettling circumstances are depicted here. For those who walked with Jesus and loved him dearly, they were enveloped by an ominous cloud which blinded their eyes of faith. To put it quite succinctly, when Jesus gave up the ghost and closed his eyes in death upon the cross, his friends were so devastated and completely confused as to what to do next. The disciples themselves became utterly disoriented. Some of them remained in hiding. Others of them put on mourning apparel. Some even decided to go fishing. But the reality is all of them were fumbling in the darkness of Friday's sad affair. They were without hope. Their dreams had disintegrated. Their aspirations had been smashed by the religio-political combine of Jerusalem and Rome. So upset were they over the crucifixion that the reality of the resurrection eluded their understanding. Late one afternoon of Resurrection Day, we observe two of the Master's followers, Cleopas and an unnamed friend, going out of Jerusalem en route to Emmaus. Sad, dejected, and completely broken in spirit. In a state of depression, they begin a 7-mile journey toward home. Their dream has vanished. Their hope has been conquered. There is nothing to do now except go home. Life has lost its sweetness. The salt has lost its savor. The light has gone out. Jesus is dead. There is no reason at all now to remain in the holy city. Jesus died on Friday. He was buried in Joseph's tomb. Of course, there is a resurrection story making the rounds, but it seems so unreal. It's too good to be true. There is nothing to do except go home. So they embark on that lonesome journey, sorrowful and depressed. They walk through the country, probably trying to crack a few jokes to cheer each other up. Every attempt to give comfort simply makes them more keenly aware of the depth of their grief. They talked about the recent happenings. They rehearsed over and over again to one another the tragic events of that last fateful week that he spent in the earth. And every recapitulation simply carries them once again to the cross. They just could not get beyond Calvary. The cross was too great a stumbling block, an obstacle in the path of their experience. Like dense, impenetrable fog, the cross blocked their vision. Depressed. Have you ever been there? Let me say a word about depression. Depression is a common phenomenon amongst us. Even as disciples of Christ and ministers of the gospel, depression is the prevailing plight of many a worker. The Christian experience has at least 3 levels. First, there are the mountaintop days, when everything is going well and the world looks bright. Need you to know that these experiences are temporary. They can't go on forever. And it's unrealistic to expect, as many people do, that we can spend life leaping from one mountain peak to another as if there are no plains or valleys in between. Instead, most of life consists of ordinary days. When we work at our usual tasks, neither elated nor depressed. The third category are dark days when we trudge heavily through confusion, through doubt, despair, discouragement. And sometimes these days string out into months or even years before we begin to experience a sense of relief and release and victory. And when they persist, these dark days are days of depression. Depression often has physical basis. At the simplest level, we know that lack of sleep and insufficient exercise, the side effects of drugs and physical illnesses, or improper diet can all create depression. Thousands of women experience depression as a part of their monthly premenstrual syndrome. Some call it PMS. Some are victimized by postpartum depression. Thank you, Sister Pat. Following childhood. There is evidence that some depression runs in families and may have some genetic basis. The depression that is most akin to preachers and workers is what is called physiologically based post-adrenaline depression. It frequently comes to those who have recently had an emotional high. And whenever the body has experienced a period of high adrenaline demand, such as coping with an emergency, speaking at evangelism council, deadline, the adrenal system becomes exhausted and switches off when the demand is over. It's like a calm following a storm, except that the calm is more like a total switch off. Most of us feel that as depression. It's the body's way, really, of demanding reprieve. It turns you off to all interest and saps you of energy so that you are forced into a period of recovery. It's usually there that the Spirit of God can work with you more effectively. During this time, the adrenal glands and other important systems are rejuvenated. And the longer your system has been in a state of demand or energy, the longer it takes to rejuvenate. Listen to this. The older we get, the less resilient is our adrenal system, and the more depressed we become after an adrenaline high. Some biblical commentators say that these two individuals were nearing senior citizenhood. These two travelers on the way to Emmaus had taken an emotional nosedive from the pinnacle of neatly organized expectations to the shocking and numbing reality of unfulfilled fantasies. I submit there is a danger. There is a danger in the regimented establishment of our own life's blueprint. There is a risk in presuming that our charted professional courses must follow the paradigm that we have established. There's a hazard in seeking to solve our dilemmas, executing our strategies, and arranging our business without factoring in God. You see, brothers and sisters, the character of God must be reproduced in His people. And to accomplish this in the last days, God must challenge the church in the most inner self. In self-dependence, we as preachers and administrators and educators still must be led by the Spirit of God. And to put it bluntly, God has to demonstrate to you before He saves you that you don't have enough resources to etch your professional or social or spiritual course without His intervention. God has to illustrate this to us before He retrieves us from this planet. He has to let us know that we don't have enough sense to solve anything. You have no answers. You have no solutions. You have no strategy for wrestling with the devil. Before God can save you and trust you in glory, He must see that you will trust His movements in this nightmare called planet Earth. And for some of us, that's difficult because we always believe we have a plan. We think we can finagle and talk and privately arrange, and some of us get up off our knees and we never give God a chance to do anything. We've already got it fixed up and figured out and planned out So in these trying days, the Lord must pitch some of that stuff back into our faces. One of the best things that can happen to you sometimes is for your plans to blow up in your face. And you have no place to turn except to God. You see, all need to recognize that in spite of degrees and positions and status in God's work, as well as all the other accoutrements of life, we don't have enough sense to journey on our own. And God reminds us by leading us collectively and individually into circumstances where we'll be reminded that He never loses control, even when it appears that He has. He's in charge. This is hard to remember, especially when we draw our own blueprint on what God will do in our lives. It's a rather dangerous thing to try to plot God's course. It's wrong, dangerously wrong, to put God on a timetable. I know a number of workers in God's cause who have neatly outlined their plans for their tomorrows. And who sort of feel that God is obligated to honor their arrangement of things. Now, to be sure, it's wise to look ahead. It's wise to plan as best you can for tomorrow's day. But you better make some room for flexibility. If I fail to do that, I deny God the freedom of His own eternity. I prepare myself for a big letdown. Yes, we ought to look and plan ahead, but always with the realization that this is God's work. And we ought to be willing to accept it whenever God moves counter to our plan. I may have a schedule, but He's got the master schedule. He doesn't give His to mine. I've got to give mine to Him. And we ought to pray every day of our lives, Thy will, O Lord, not mine. My will be lost in Thine. Have Thine own way, Lord. Have Thine own way. Thou art the potter. I am the clay. God's blueprint for Jesus' life was different from that of His friends. From eternity, God had already declared, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. From heaven, God had already declared, He'll be wounded for man's transgressions and bruised for man's iniquities. According to heaven's blueprint, Jesus came to the world to die. But the disciples had their own blueprint. It was a pretty good one. But it left out Calvary. And Calvary was too great an omission. What in reality was God's great transaction was to these men man's great tragedy. Yes, they were hurt in heart, troubled in mind, and broken in spirit. They were blinded by the cross and couldn't see Jesus when He drew nigh. The Bible says this stranger broke in on their journey. He interrupted their conversation. He broke in and said, I observe that you men are talking as you walk. What's the nature of your discussion? I also noticed that you're sad. What are you talking about? Cleopas immediately answered in effect, man, where have you been? Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who doesn't know what happened here in the last couple of days? Everybody else in the region knows. Where have you been? How did you fail to hear these things? The stranger retorted, what things, man? What are you talking about? They said concerning this Jesus of Nazareth, who was a mighty prophet indeed, and in word our chief priests and rulers conspired to crucify Him. And this we didn't expect. You see, we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. That was our great hope. For centuries, we had longed for the promised Messiah. Our father Abraham received the promise out in the air of Chaldees. And we thought it was fulfilled in Jesus. We had hoped that Shiloh had come. We had hoped that he was the expected Messiah. We had hoped that our warfare was ended. We had hoped that Israel's valley would be exalted. We had hoped that the kingdom had come. We had hoped that he would plant the banner of God high on the walls of Jerusalem. We had hoped, we had hoped, we had hoped, we had hoped that it was he who would redeem Israel. But he died. And this is the third day since it happened. Some of the women of our company amazed us with a certain report today. They visited his tomb early this morning, and they didn't find his body. And they came back and said that they had seen a vision of angels who told them that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb, and we found it just as they said it was. But him, we did not see. And then the stranger suddenly turned to them and said, "Oh, fools. Slow of heart. All that the prophets had spoken, what all of you have described here, was part of the master plan of God." The stranger preached to them and told them the necessity of Jesus' sufferings. And as the sermon came to a close, they came nigh the village of Emmaus. And they bade them farewell, and they constrained him to remain. "Do stay with us. It's nearly evening. Come on, hang out a little while. You've cheered our hearts." He agreed to go home with them. They went indoors, and the Phillips translation puts it fitly. It says, "And then it happened." They sat down to dinner, and the stranger took a loaf in his hand. He blessed the loaf, and he began to break bread, and he handed them the pieces of the loaf. And as he did so, something happened in the machinery of their psyche. There were great flashbacks. They thought of how the disciples talked about Thursday night in an upper room when a man took bread and broke it and gave thanks and saying, "This is my body, which is broken for many." They thought of Friday's episode when Jesus' body was broken and mangled on the tree of shame. They thought of the great sermon of prophecy preached by the stranger on the way to Emmaus. And while they thought, the scales began to fall from their eyes. Their blindness lifted. Their blurred vision began to heal, and suddenly their eyes were opened, and they knew who it was. Their depression dissipated. And as quickly as he made himself known, he vanished from their sights. Just a flash of glory. But that was enough. Just a glance at divinity. But that was enough. Just a glimpse of God. But that was enough. All they can say was, "Did not our heart burn?" Well, he talked to us, by the way, while he opened to us the scripture. They rose from the table, and like Michael Johnson, they ran all the way back to Jerusalem and told the disciples, "The Lord is risen indeed." Now, set forth in this colorful, moving passage are three simple yet exceedingly profound truths. The Spirit speaks to us here in the first place. In this Christian soldier, in spite of how depressed you might be, or how things might seem. Whatever you do, however you feel, wherever you find yourself, the first truth is, don't give up too soon.
All right. Amen.
You see, Cleopas and his traveling companion had given up. You see, they surmised that the story had ended. All the glory belonged to the past. Life's best joys had already occurred. The best days were behind them.
All right.
Peace and happiness belonged to the time before Calvary. They looked at it sort of as the cross being a huge partition. Everything before the cross was a kind of wonderland. But now they lived in no man's land. Have you ever been there? They said in essence that God had let them down. How often is this mood repeated in the lives of workers? I've seen young, bright, innovative workers in God's cause move along in this great church, enjoying the delights of the Christian life, and then suddenly the joy they knew goes down like the evening sun. Doesn't take much for some people to lose heart, to lose faith. One little setback, one disappointment, one heartbreak, one loss, just one unanticipated move. One unanticipated occurrence leaves them dejected, without hope and without the will to press on. You see, they've drawn their own blueprint.
All right.
They're not prepared for things that they didn't figure on at the outset. You see, we view one way to resolve our problem and accomplish our agendas, but God has got a reservoir of alternatives in his mind. Some of you might be experiencing the supreme test of your lives as you listen to me. The height of a crisis you might find yourselves in. And the Lord has had to and continues to teach, this is your schedule, this is mine. And for Christianity is learning to fully trust the Lord. All of us have stood before God. All of us have clamored impatiently, nudging and pushing. Follow my plan, God, in order to accomplish this. And God has to say, no.
All right. That's right.
And you know, brothers and sisters, many are not prepared for things they didn't figure on at the outset. But I say to you this morning, whoever you are, don't give up. All our lives are bound to know some pain. Everybody has got to cry sometimes. Tragedy and hurt are akin to the human predicament. At some time, everybody here is going to feel like a motherless child. But don't give up. This is God's way of perfecting our souls. Don't give up. Keep on pressing. Keep on believing. Keep on trying. Don't give up. For God, who allows his children to wander in the wilderness for a while, is the same God who brings his children to the land of promise. The God who allows the crucifixion on Friday is the same God who provides a resurrection on Sunday. The God who plants a thorn in the flesh is the same God who says, my grace is sufficient. I tell you today, it's getting too late to give up. The second word in this passage says simply but sublimely, if you walk with God, he'll talk to you. You see, one of the noble things that can be said of Cleopas and his friend is that they did not refuse the company of the stranger. The inspired biblical commentator Ellen White says, and I quote, had the disciples failed to press their invitation, they would not have known that their traveling companion was the risen Lord. Christ never forces his company upon anyone. He interests himself in those who need him. Gladly he will enter the humblest home and cheer the lowliest heart. But if men are too indifferent to think of the heavenly guest or ask him to abide with them, he passes on. Thus many meet with great loss. These two sorrowful travelers allowed Jesus, or this stranger as it were, to walk with him. And when he overtook them on that lonesome journey, they received him as a fellow traveler, and he talked with them by the way. He opened the scriptures for their understanding. He set their souls on hallowed fire. There is biblical evidence to prove that if you let him walk with you, he'll talk to you. I'm a witness. He'll show you some things you've never seen before. He'll make your journey a little easy. He'll brighten the road by his presence. The trouble with some of us is we let everybody walk with us except Jesus. Friends surround us, engulf us, and almost choke us to death. Their noisy chatter prevents us from hearing Jesus when he knocks at the door. We spend too much time in crowds. We move in crowds. We walk crowded streets. I stay in Harlem. We shop in crowded stores. We travel on crowded buses and subways. We travel congested freeways. Even our thoughts are crowded. A lot of us would be a whole lot better off if we would empty some of the junk out of our minds. You'd better learn how to move in the company of Jesus. We'd better learn how to take time daily to steal away to Jesus. There are days I'd like to be all alone with Jesus, my Lord. I can tell him all my troubles, and he ain't gonna tell nobody. If you let him walk with you, he'll talk to you. And I want you to know that God speaks in December 1996, just as he did when he talked with Moses at the burning bush. He clamors to remind you that he is still the great I am. He looks at human brokenness and depression, and he still echoes from the portals of paradise as he did thousands of years ago. I am. I am. Symbiotically intertwined with your necessities. I am compassionately related to every human need. I am the guarantor of every legitimate dream. I am the answer to every sincere plea for help. I am before Abraham was. I am. He identifies himself in times of human needs. To the hungry, he says, I am food. To the blind, he says, I am insight. To the frustrated, he says, I am a window of opportunity. In the catch-22 situation, he says, I am a bridge over troubled water. To the dead and trampled, he says, I am the life giver. To the lost and weary, he says, I am your God. To the rejected, he says, I am your elder brother. To the confused, he says, I am the true blueprint. You see, Jesus wants us to know that he is still the companion on the journey of life that helps you and assists you through perpetual conversation. And our forefathers put it, my God don't speak like a natural man, but he speaks so the saints do understand. And if you tune in, he'll tell you what you need to know. If you walk with him, he'll talk to you. The third and final truth of this passage is simple, but supreme. And it's this: no matter how broken your spirit might be, God can heal your brokenness. I can understand the plight of these men traveling to Emmaus. Though they could not see beyond Calvary, the cross experience itself was enough to scar and wound their spirits. For it did seem that righteousness was without reward. It did seem that God's justice went bankrupt. One gets the feeling that life was a dream, empty and without meaning. He who did not deserve death had died in the midst of mockery. at the hands of wicked men. That's grim and gory. That's grotesque and ghastly. Hearts can't help but bleed. Spirits are understandably broken. You see, it was a terrible tragedy when Jesus died. You see, when Jesus died, hope died. Love died. The church died. Salvation, redemption died when Jesus died. But when he was resurrected, hope was resurrected. Love was resurrected. The church was resurrected. And the word from glory is God can resurrect a broken spirit into a burning heart, and he heals it in a strange way. With a broken body, with broken hands, and with broken brain. He wounds his son in order to heal our wounds. He afflicts his beloved to repair our affliction. That's the mystery of godliness. Oh, you who are broken this morning, in body, in mind, or in spirit, you ought to lift up your heads. Open up your eyes. Oh, ye dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. God understands your condition. God knows your frame. He remembers that you're dust. God is aware that our spirits get crushed sometimes, but there's healing in his wings. Have your hopes ever been dashed? Have you ever reached for something that you were not able to touch? Have your plans disintegrated before your very eyes? Our best dreams are sometimes shattered. Marriages are on the rocks. That income turns to bankruptcy. That child doesn't make good. But I tell you this morning, there's a heavenly Father who knows all about you. He knows just how much we can bear. Did you know that you can bear much more than you could ever imagine? God knows that. You've got to admit yourself. You're amazed sometimes. You know how it is. When you're down, in the depths of despair and depression, and there continues to be this stirring in you that just won't be down inside of you, even though you are down. You'll be depressed, but there is something inside of you that's keep calling you up. That's Jesus. God has placed into the heart of every human being this resilience, this godliness that just will not be defeated, that just keeps on trying, that just keeps on bouncing back. And as low as you get, you still find yourself saying, by the grace of God, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. I want you to know the devil is frustrated. Dope addicts turned around. Murderers repent. Gets to it. Immoral men and women turn around. God is able, because there is something that he's put inside of the most depressed and despondent individual that keeps on rising up and is powerful in the sight of God. And just as the devil has got you pressed and pinched and wounded and mangled and depressed in the depths of despair, we can't raise our backs. We can't raise our shoulders. We can just raise our finger and point toward heaven and declare, I shall not be moved. Just like a tree planted by the rivers of water, I shall not be moved. Our perseverance empowers us to hang in there. Can you see these travelers leaping to their feet, running back to Jerusalem, their broken spirits healed, their hearts on hallowed fire, crying out, hey, he's alive. He's alive. I don't know about you, but every day of my life, I encounter brokenness in people. Folk who have given up in life, in family, in ministry, in career. Somebody's spirit this morning is broken. Through a broken home, a sick body, a stagnant career, a soiled reputation, a dashed expectation, a missed opportunity. Life may have veered in the direction of chaos and calamity. You might even find yourself feeling that God has dissed you, forgotten you,
blueprint of your life or career has disintegrated before your very eyes, you must remember that God has a master plan which supersedes your plan. You pray for an easier life. God says, I want you to have eternal life. You pray for healing. God says, I've got in mind a resurrection. You pray for money for the Department of Water and Power. Jesus says, I've got a light in a new city that will never go out. If you're broken today, I encourage you, try to remember. If you're counting your losses instead of your gains, try to remember. If you're here today about to give up, try to remember. Remember what? Remember that he hasn't brought you this far to leave you now. Remember that he's brought you from a mighty long way. Remember that weeping might endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Remember that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. No doubt, certainty, no fear, power, no defeat, victory, because I serve a risen Savior. He's alive, for they placed him in a tomb and put guards on the outside and a stone at the door, but he kicked free, and because he's free, I'm free, and because he's loose, I'm loose, and because he's unshackled, the sky is the limit for me. Because he's got power, I've got power to achieve the impossible. Jesus changes broken spirits into burning hearts. Let me tell you about my Jesus. He is the best employment agent if you don't have a job. He's the repairer of a soiled reputation. When you've messed up, he's a robe to cover your shame. When you're lonely, he's a companion. He's my bread when I'm hungry. He's my water when I'm thirsty. He's my rock. He's my sheep. He's my wheel in the middle of a wheel. He's my Shekinah that lights the dark way. He's the veil through which I reach God. He's the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. He's the way, the truth, and the light. He's the Savior for any sinner who wants salvation. He's intercessor supreme. He's mediator, redeemer, restorer, the fairest of 10,000. That's enough. From broken spirits